Hi, I'm Jason Grover for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to talk about some Joni Mitchell.
Big shelf.
So, look, we're seeing sort of a reevaluation of Joni Mitchell in, I think, a perfect time. There are many people that have loved her for years and years and years. She's an extraordinary talent, absolutely iconic, beloved, an artist. But as I think contemporary music has shifted and you've seen more and more people sort of both look backwards and look forwards, they're recognizing that in some ways, despite being, on the top of many people's lists, she's actually increasing in stature as her reputation grows decades later, which is kind of phenomenal. As music sort of shifts into different directions and pop music changes, you just look back and you're like, how did one person have so much talent and so much capacity to completely, change the type of music that was being played? To consider her part of the folk idiom, she was so much more. She helped transform the singer-songwriter ethos in such fundamental ways. An incredible voice, incredible talent. Changed her instrument, changed the way that people played the instrument, just phenomenal. And surrounded herself throughout her career with just stellar musicians that elevated her. She had direct relationships with some of the other icons. Obviously, David Crosby discovered her, found her, and actually produced her first record. She was in a long-term relationship with Graham Nash, who she then left and was with James Taylor. So right in the period, that sort of early 70s period, she really was at the center of that universe, the muse for so many of these people, a visual artist, but a musical artist par excellence. If you just listen to her first four records and just see the way that these play out, it's just extraordinary. And I grant you, some people will find her high soprano, or I guess it's a high alto, low soprano, whatever it is, maybe not to their taste, but the chordal structures, the changes, the sophistication that would lead to her basically jazz work in some later records is there within the context of sing-song stuff. She writes songs like Both Sides Now that just feel that they've always existed. It just feels like a traditional song in a funny way that's just existed for hundreds of years. Yes, it's sing-songy, but it's so beautifully put together. And then by the time you get to some of the later albums that we'll be talking about, you just get these deep, intensely personal lyrics where Chris Christopherson very famously said, leave some for yourself. Don't give it all away. By the time you got into so many artists now just simply spilling their guts and exposing themselves in utter ways for their fan to draw connections, sometimes to draw the connections in intimate ways and sometimes just to simply show off. A bunch of that actually sort of cascades directly from Joni. So this is her first record, Songs to a Seagull. You can tell it's a first pressing. It might be a little bit hard to see. I'm actually going to take it out of the plastic. But they actually cut off, it's a bunch of birds here, and they actually cut off the title there. The L's are sort of chopped off here. You'll see that there's some unique pressing errors that she actually went in under. Gatefold back in the day, produced by David Crosby, and the story is that he, let's be clear, they were doing a lot of drugs back then. He had never produced a record before. The story, as mentioned, is that he walked into a club, heard her play, and decided that his life had changed, justifiably. Brought her in his studio. She got signed to Reprise, which is, I believe, if I'm not crazy, the Frank Sinatra owned label, the sub label of Warner. So on Reprise, she recorded this record in Los Angeles, and what David Crosby did was he put a bunch of microphones inside a grand piano and tried to record the ambience and the style and the feeling. And then the studio, the label heard it and like, well, this is garbage. And so they rolled off all the high-end hiss and all that stuff and created sort of this sort of sound. It sounds, very muted. It's a beautiful record with some beautiful songs. Michael from Mountains is gorgeous. Song to a Seagull itself. Cactus Tree is probably the biggest one that sort of carried on to her live career after this. But really interesting, unique, powerful record that never sounded probably the way that it could have if it had been recorded a little bit better. Lots of regrets about that. So we've been waiting a long time for sort of a reclamation of what potentially was on this tape and to see what actually happened. More on that later. So following Song to a Seagull, she released Clouds. This is on Reprise Records. I believe this is a first pressing, certainly a first pressing cover. This is one with this label. Extraordinary record. This has Both Sides Now on it. Judy Collins took that to the charts. So like somebody like Christopherson, there was a thought, or maybe even somebody like Laura Nero, it might have been that Joni would simply be somebody who did, wrote incredible songs that other people then took on to be hits. Joan Baez, all kinds of people, and Lauren Cohen, all kinds of people ended up covering her stuff. But between Chelsea Morning and Both Sides Now, two monster songs on this, really fantastic release. You can see this, two versions here. The other one was the sort of multicolored reprise. This, again, the sort of slightly beigey one. This cover actually has the error that was done. It's going to be very hard to see. But right where my finger is, there's a line. And it's as if they taped it, the artwork. And then that got airbrushed out on later versions. So just an incredible record, and again showcasing for a sophomore effort, absolutely giving everything that we sort of expect by Joni. Her third record, Lays in the Canyon. Stuff like obviously Morning Morgantown is the opening track, Lays in the Canyon the title track, but Big Yellow Taxi became a huge hit, covered by all kinds of people. Buffy St. Marie's version is amazing. It's actually in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But some phenomenal stuff. And this is where her version of Woodstock is. Quite famously, her manager talked her out of doing the Woodstock gig in order to do the Dick Cavett show. Her, at the time, I guess exes, I don't know where they were at into the relationship, I believe exes at the time, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young played Woodstock. In the midst of her doing this Dick Cavett thing, they actually showed up. So later, she, despite not having been to Woodstock, she wrote the sort of definitive anthem, the song that actually ended up being in the recording for the film. Real beautiful sounding record, pretty phenomenal. This is a first pressing, and as you go along, there was a Rhino vinyl release not that long ago, I want to say 10-11 years ago. I bought it in Montreal for $27. Pressed at RTI, and a good sounding version of this record, much whiter, as it were, much cleaner copy. And then we come to Blue. Potentially the most influential record that she ever did. Absolutely stunning. This is the also Rhino vinyl, 180 gram. This one I mastered by Grundman, I believe. I don't think it's I believe it's a Bernie Grundman, if I'm not crazy. This was actually re-released like this year. The exact same pressing, same layout. Very beautiful sounding record. I do not have the DCC. I do not have the Steve Hoffman mix of this, which goes for thousands. But it is a very beautiful version of this recording, done after she schlepped through Europe, hung out a bunch of Greece, picked up different instruments, and completely changed her sound. Very intimate, very exposed, but just has some stunning tracks. River, one of the most beautiful Christmas, non-Christmas songs ever done. Little Green, My Old Man, and then something like Carrie, which is like this, warm, effusive piece right in the middle of this sort of almost a love song to somebody that you're sort of breaking up with. It's pretty wild. So those are the sort of the top four of Joni, and you know, there have been some pretty bad releases. There's been stuff that hasn't been pressed particularly well on vinyl. Some of the CD releases have been hit and miss for sure. So I was extremely pleased when, as part of her sort of getting back into re-releasing stuff and bringing stuff back into more in the public consciousness, they released a boom box set. So in this box set, the Reprise albums, 1968 to 1971, you have her 4 definitive albums, as they talk about. So here, I'm gonna dig this up, much cleaner, but still really, really beautiful artwork. Songs of Seagull still sort of cropped off a little bit as it plays out. Same gatefold, and the records themselves have the two-tone Reprise original label on it. This is a remix. It's not just a remaster. They actually went back as much as they could, re-EQ'd, added a bunch of reverb. And this is the big deal record for our collectors. We've been waiting for this for a long time. And how does it play compared to the original? It's still not going to be this amazing audiophile experience. It's very different. It's definitely bathed in reverb in a different way. It's definitely EQ'd in a totally different way. I think it sounds good. I don't know if it replaces the original. This is probably as good as it's going to get for sounding like this is going to sound, and I'm going to keep the other one because I'm going to have both versions that I can go back and forth. On digital, the album's even more of a mess in some ways, but yeah, I've bought multiple versions trying to find the cleanest first that I can, and the difference is quite radical. It's a very, very different mix between what's included in the box set and what's included in the original. It's definitely worth keeping an original. It's definitely worth keeping around, and to have these two sort of visions of it. Frankly, I just don't think we're ever going to get that version, which is maybe what was in Crosby's head, maybe what was expected to be. Now, all the other elements here, again, it's so nice, shiny, beautifully printed. The difference between the glossy and the non-glossy version of Lays in the Canyon without the text here, was sort of just showcasing the artwork, Joni's own artwork, self-portrait. You have here Clouds, again, another self-portrait by Joni, without the misprint there. Absolutely stunning. And then we have Immortal Blue. Non-textured, definitely a brighter color than normal. Well, normal's sort of hard to judge. Definitely a brighter color. You can see the difference between the two printings. Well, this is obviously much more indigo, and this is sort of a brighter blue. But nonetheless, this is the new version. And I expected this and that one to be identical. I'm like, this is, beautiful. Bernie Grundman did all this nonsense too, that it would simply be the same. And they're different. Which one's better? Pick. Take your choice. They're both beautiful. They're both very different versions, especially if you have a relatively revealing system. So this box set truly is, in so many ways, definitive. If you're only ever going to have these first 4 records by Joni, I think this is what you buy. And if you're a little bit crazy, you dive in and get the other versions, which is why I did. But the fact that you can go now into a store and buy this and immediately have 4 of the greatest records ever made by one of the greatest artists ever born, you should just do it. It's as simple as that. It has a nice little essay by Brandi Carlile just talking about how she, it's something that really warms my heart as a critic, as it were. It's basically about how she underplayed what Joni was. She sort of pigeonholed her, seagulled her, but pigeonholed her into a particular sort of framework and didn't really give her as much attention as maybe she should have. And as she grew as an artist, as she grew musically, she got more and more of these records. And I really think that there's a lot to that. It's a really beautifully written piece. Simple box, does what it needs to do. The artwork on the back. And yeah, 4 records, absolutely no-brainer for you to pick this up. This is truly one of the great releases of the year. Finally, impeccable pressing, beautiful sounding. Does it trump the other stuff that was done? I have the other stuff, so I'm not really worried about it trumping. But for me, these are going to be likely my go-to versions of this. I find, I don't know what they did. It's been up in the air about how it was actually sourced. It says here, yeah, remastered by Bernie Grundman, but it doesn't say whether it's straight from the analog tapes or whether he was dealing with the high-resolution digital masters and still did his magic. I don't really care. They just sound amazing. It is limited. The box is limited to 10,000. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be releasing these individually. We don't know. But while you have the chance, pick up this release. I highly, highly recommend it. I truly think that it is a beautiful celebration of one of the most beautiful artists of this or any other century. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe. Please follow us on social media, and we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.